The howl of the electromagnetic storm tore through the heavy silence of Xylos, a desolate moon where nothing good survived for long. Kalen Marsh stood at the entrance of his makeshift outpost, watching violet lightning fracture the sickly green sky. His weather-beaten face, half hidden behind an unkempt beard, remained impassive, but his eyes, those tired eyes that had seen too much, narrowed slightly as he calculated the storm's intensity. Another bad one. Third this month. He secured the hatch of his dwelling, a patchwork of salvaged ship parts and local materials that somehow withstood Xylos's punishing environment. Inside, the cramped space contained only essentials: a bunk, field rations, water purification system, and an array of cobbled-together tech that kept him alive in this toxic paradise. 6 years on this hellhole, and he still wasn't dead. Some days, that fact surprised even him. Kalen had come to Xylos to disappear. After the Cassini Outpost massacre, after watching his entire Ranger unit die while he survived, the guilt had driven him to the farthest edge of charted space. Here, among poisonous vegetation and electromagnetic storms that fried standard communications, he could forget the universe and, more importantly, it could forget him. The outpost's ancient long-range sensor array crackled to life, emitting a sound it hadn't made in years. Kalen froze, his hand hovering over his evening meal of synthetic protein and foraged fungi. The array wasn't supposed to pick up anything. That's why he'd chosen this location. Nothing reached Xylos except the occasional lost freight hauler, and even they knew better than to land during storm season. He moved to the sensor panel, adjusting dials and pushing buttons with practiced precision. The signal was weak, distorted by the storm, but definitely artificial. Not human standard, but clearly a distress beacon, pulsing with desperate regularity before abruptly cutting out. "Not my problem," he muttered, reaching to power down the receiver. Then he heard it. Even through the howling tempest outside, it cut through a scream. Not the strange calls of Xylos's predators or the moaning of wind through the toxic forest. This was a scream of pain, of terror, of sentient suffering. It echoed briefly, then disappeared into the storm's cacophony. Kalen stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs. The sound had awakened something he'd buried years ago. The ranger, the rescuer, the man who once swore an oath to protect. "Don't do it," he told himself, even as his hands began gathering supplies. Not your fight, not your problem. But his body moved with decisive purpose, ignoring his mind's protests. He checked his pulse rifle, outdated but reliable, and strapped on a patched environmental suit that had seen better days. Into a weatherproof pack went medical supplies, ration bars, purified water, and multi-tool. He activated the outpost's security protocols, though they'd offer minimal protection if anything truly determined wanted entry. One look, he promised himself. Verify and walk away. That's it. The storm lashed at him the moment he stepped outside, acidic rain sizzling against his protective gear. Visibility extended barely 20 meters, the forest beyond a blur of bioluminescent vegetation and swaying tendrils. He activated his helmet's enhanced vision mode, a luxury he rarely indulged to conserve power, and headed in the direction of the scream. The forest of Xylos was a nightmare of evolutionary adaptation. Plants with razor-edged leaves that tracked movement. Fungal colonies that released hallucinogenic spores when disturbed. Predators that had evolved perfect camouflage against the glowing foliage. Kalen moved with the quiet confidence of someone intimately familiar with these dangers, avoiding the most treacherous areas with slight adjustments to his path. He followed the fading energy signature from the distress beacon, relying on his portable scanner to guide him through the storm. Every sense remained alert, a necessity on Xylos where distraction meant death. Twice he froze as shadow stalkers crossed his path, their 8-limbed forms barely visible even with enhanced vision. Once he detoured completely around a clearing filled with tremor sacs, fungal growths that exploded at the slightest vibration. An hour into the search, when rational thought told him to turn back, his scanner picked up an energy anomaly ahead. Artificial, powerful, and unlike anything native to Xylos. He approached cautiously, pulse rifle raised, moving from tree to tree for cover. The sound came first, a weak, pained whimper. Then, as he pushed aside a curtain of luminous vines, he saw her. She hung suspended in midair, wrapped in pulsing bands of blue-white energy that tightened visibly with each struggle. Her form was humanoid, but unmistakably alien. Slender limbs slightly longer than human proportion, skin with intricate patterns that emitted a soft pearlescent glow. Her face, contorted in pain, featured large amber eyes now wide with fear, and her head bore a crest of what appeared to be sensitive tendrils rather than hair. Blood of an iridescent blue trickled from wounds where the energy bands cut deepest. The trap itself was a marvel of technology, far beyond the crude snares of local hunters or pirates. A portable energy matrix generator sat anchored to the ground, projecting the containment field with ruthless efficiency. This was military-grade capture equipment, designed to take prisoners alive, but not necessarily comfortably. As Kalen stepped into the clearing, those amber eyes locked onto him. The creature, woman, let out a warning hiss, baring teeth slightly sharper than human standard. Despite her obvious agony and weakness, she tried to position herself defensively within her bonds. She thinks I'm one of them, Kalen realized. Whoever set the trap. He lowered his weapon slowly, keeping it visible but pointed at the ground. Easy, he said, though he doubted she understood. I'm not here to hurt you. He demonstrated his intentions by setting the rifle down completely, then removing his pack and taking out a scanner. The alien watched his every movement, suspicion warring with desperate hope in those expressive eyes. Kalen approached the energy trap cautiously. Its technology was unfamiliar but not incomprehensible. He recognized components similar to Centaurian containment fields. The trap appeared designed to react aggressively to tampering. Disarming it would require careful manipulation. This is going to take a minute, he said, addressing the alien as if she could understand. Something about speaking aloud made the situation feel less surreal. Try not to move. These bands constrict with resistance. The alien's breathing was shallow and rapid, but she remained still as Kalen examined the trap. He located what appeared to be the control node, well protected behind a complex security mechanism. Standard bypass methods would trigger defensive protocols. Instead, he focused on the power source, a crystalline battery pulsing with blue energy. This might hurt, he warned, watching her reaction. Those amber eyes narrowed slightly, as if she were assessing his words despite the language barrier. But it's the only way I can see to get you out. Using his multi-tool, Kalen carefully exposed the connection between the battery and the main trap mechanism. A sudden arc of energy leapt out, catching his hand. Pain seared through his arm, but he gritted his teeth and continued. With precise movements, he severed the connection in 3 specific points, causing the energy field to fluctuate wildly. The alien cried out as the bands contracted sharply, then loosened. Kalen worked faster, redirecting power away from the containment field. With a final cut and a twist of components never meant to be combined, he forced the trap into reset mode. The energy bands dissolved, and the alien collapsed to the forest floor. Kalen approached cautiously. She lay unconscious, her breathing ragged but present. Up close, her injuries appeared worse. The energy bands had cut deep into her flesh, and her exposure to Xylos's toxic atmosphere had caused chemical burns where her clothing had torn. She needed medical attention soon. He faced a choice: leave her here, where the trap setters would likely return, or take her to his outpost and accept whatever consequences followed. His years of self-imposed exile screamed at him to walk away. Instead, he gently lifted her from the ground. Surprised by her density, she weighed considerably more than her slight frame suggested. As he adjusted his hold, her head lolled against his shoulder, those strange tendrils brushing against his environmental suit. Bad decision, Marsh, he muttered to himself, gathering his equipment with his free hand. Very bad decision. The journey back was excruciating. The storm had intensified, visibility dropping to near zero. Twice he nearly lost his footing on the treacherous terrain. The alien's unconscious form grew heavier with each step, and Kalen's old injuries, souvenirs from the massacre, throbbed in protest. But Ranger training had burned one truth into his soul: you never leave someone behind. Not again. When the outpost finally appeared through the storm haze, Kalen nearly wept with relief. He staggered the final distance, punched in his security code with trembling fingers, and stumbled inside as the door hissed open. The comparative warmth and safety washed over him as he carefully laid the alien on his bunk. The cramped interior of the outpost revealed its true state in the harsh lighting: a chaotic collection of equipment, spare parts, and the bare necessities of survival. Not a home, merely a place to exist. Until now, that had been enough. Kalen removed his environmental suit, wincing at the electrical burn on his hand where the trap had struck him. That could wait. He turned to his unconscious guest, hesitating only briefly before beginning emergency treatment. His medical equipment was basic but functional. The scanner revealed the extent of her injuries: multiple lacerations from the energy bonds, first-degree burns from Xylos's atmosphere, mild respiratory distress from toxic spore inhalation, and signs of dehydration and exhaustion suggesting she'd been fleeing for some time before being captured. Working methodically, Kalen cleaned and sealed her wounds with synthetic skin, administered broad-spectrum antibiotics that his scanner suggested would be compatible with her physiology, and set up an impromptu intravenous hydration system. Throughout the process, he maintained a professional detachment, focusing on the tasks rather than the extraordinary situation he'd placed himself in. Hours passed as he monitored her condition. The storm outside had reached its zenith, shaking the outpost with its fury. Kalen occupied himself by analyzing the components he'd salvaged from the trap, confirming his suspicions: advanced military technology, not standard issue for any local force. Whoever had set it came from far away and with significant resources. A soft sound drew his attention back to the bunk. The alien was awake, those amber eyes now alert and fixed warily on him. She remained perfectly still, assessing her situation with remarkable composure given the circumstances. "You're safe," Kalen said, maintaining his distance. For now, at least. She made no indication of understanding, but her gaze tracked to the medical equipment beside her, then to her treated wounds. He could almost see her calculating, connecting actions to intentions. Communication would be their first hurdle. Kalen rummaged through a storage compartment and extracted an outdated universal translator, standard equipment for rangers operating in border regions. The device was designed to recognize patterns in unknown languages and establish rudimentary translation matrices. It wouldn't be perfect, but it might allow basic exchange. He placed the translator between them and activated it. "Do you understand me?" he asked clearly. The device hummed, processing. After a long moment, it produced a series of melodic tones and clicks. The alien's eyes widened slightly. She responded with similar sounds, more complex and nuanced. The translator struggled, lights flashing as it attempted to build a language model from insufficient data. "Need more?" "Speech patterns," Kalen said slowly. "Talk more and it learns." For several minutes, they exchanged simple phrases, Kalen describing objects in the outpost, the alien hesitantly responding. Gradually, the translator began producing fragmented interpretations. "Danger still comes," it rendered from one of her longer statements. "Why? Help me." A fair question. Kalen considered how to answer, settling for, it seemed like the right thing to do. The translation conveyed something approximating his meaning, judging by her reaction. A slight tilt of her head, those amber eyes studying him with renewed intensity. As the translator improved, they established basics. Her name was Lyra, or something the translator approximated as such. She understood she was on Xylos, had crash-landed several days prior while fleeing pursuers. The trap had caught her during her third day of evasion. Kalen provided his name and basic situation without elaboration. She didn't press for more, seemingly recognizing the boundaries of their tentative alliance. Their rudimentary conversation was interrupted by a warning beep from Kalen's security system. Someone, or something, was moving near the outpost perimeter sensors. "Stay here," he instructed, retrieving his pulse rifle. "Don't make noise." He dimmed the outpost lights and moved to the observation port, engaging the thermal imaging system. Through the storm's interference, he detected 3 distinct heat signatures moving with disciplined precision, not the random patterns of Xylo's predators. They wore advanced environmental suits that masked most of their thermal output, but couldn't hide completely. Hunters. Professionals. Almost certainly the ones who had set the trap. Kalen returned to Lyra, who had managed to sit up despite her injuries. "Your pursuers," he said quietly. 3 of them, approaching from the east. The translator conveyed his words. Fear flashed across her features, quickly replaced by grim determination. She attempted to stand, wobbling dangerously before Kalen steadied her. "Need to go." The translator rendered her urgent response. "They find me. You die too. You can barely walk," Kalen argued. "And the storm. They have tracking device," she interrupted, gesturing to a small wound on her shoulder that Kalen had treated without recognizing its significance. "Planted when trap caught me. This changed everything. If they could track her specifically, nowhere in the outpost would be safe. They needed to move, and quickly." "We need to remove it," Kalen said, already reaching for his medical scanner. "No time," she insisted. "Cut tracker, they know. Already." She was right. The moment they tampered with the tracker, it would alert her pursuers. They needed a different approach. "The storm," Kalen said suddenly. "It interferes with signals. If we go deeper into the high-energy zone, it might mask the tracker long enough to remove it safely." Lyra seemed to understand the logic, nodding once. She attempted again to stand, this time succeeding with visible effort. Kalen quickly gathered essential supplies, weapons, medical kit, water, emergency rations. He offered Lyra his backup environmental suit, too large for her frame, but better than nothing against Xylos' toxic atmosphere. "There's a cave system 2 kilometers north," he explained as he helped her into the suit. "Heavy mineral deposits, significant electromagnetic interference. If we can reach it, we might have a chance to remove the tracker without being detected." The translator struggled with a complex explanation, but Lyra nodded again, determination evident in her bearing despite her weakened state. As they prepared to leave, Kalen made a final decision. He programmed the outpost systems to execute a delayed overload, not enough to cause significant damage, but sufficient to create a distraction and possibly convince their pursuers that they died in the explosion. "Ready?" he asked, sealing his own environmental suit. Lyra straightened, wincing with the effort. Through the translator came her response. "Lead. I follow." They slipped out through the outpost's emergency exit, directly into the heart of the storm. Visibility had deteriorated further, the air filled with toxic particulate matter that swirled in violent eddies. Kalen kept a firm grip on Lyra's arm, guiding her through the treacherous landscape. Despite her injuries, she moved with surprising grace, adapting quickly to his guidance with minimal communication. They had covered perhaps half a kilometer when a flash of light behind them illuminated the storm clouds. The outpost distraction had triggered earlier than planned. Either the system had malfunctioned, or their pursuers had forced entry. "Faster," Kalen urged, though he knew Lyra was already pushing beyond her limits. The terrain grew more challenging as they approached the cave system, rocky outcroppings replacing the toxic forest. Each step required careful placement, the ground slippery with acidic precipitation. Lyra stumbled twice, her strength flagging visibly. After the second fall, Kalen simply lifted her, ignoring her translated protests about slowing them both. The cave entrance appeared suddenly through the storm haze, a jagged mouth in the cliff face, barely large enough for a person to enter upright. Kalen set Lyra down at the threshold, checking behind them for pursuit. The storm had become their ally, obscuring visibility and masking their trail, but it wouldn't hold their hunters at bay for long. Inside, the cave widened into a complex network of tunnels. Bioluminescent fungi provided sparse illumination, revealing metallic veins running through the rock, the source of the electromagnetic interference. Kalen guided them deeper, following a mental map from previous explorations, until they reached a chamber large enough to stand in comfortably. "Here," he said, helping Lyra sit against a relatively smooth section of wall. "We should be safe enough to remove the tracker." The translator conveyed his words, and Lyra nodded wearily. She indicated the wound on her shoulder, then made a cutting motion. Kalen removed his medical kit and scanner. The device located the tracker, a sophisticated piece of technology approximately the size of a grain of rice, embedded just beneath her skin. Its signal was indeed weakened by the cave's natural interference, but not completely blocked. "This will hurt," he warned, preparing a localized anesthetic. Lyra waved away the pain medication, gesturing urgently that they should proceed. Time was critical. With surgical precision, Kalen made a small incision and extracted the tracker, a tiny metallic capsule glowing with faint blue light. Without hesitation, Lyra took it from his hands and pressed it against one of the metallic veins in the cave wall. The tracker sparked briefly, then went dark as the cave's natural properties overwhelmed its circuitry. "Clever," Kalen acknowledged, applying synthetic skin to her new wound. They rested briefly, sharing water and a ration bar. Lyra's strength was returning incrementally, though she remained far from fully recovered. Through increasingly coherent translations, they began to share more significant information. "Who are they?" Kalen asked, gesturing in the general direction of their pursuers. "Military, Royal Guard." The translator rendered her response. "Most elite. On my world. They hunt without mercy." "Your world? Where is that?" "Far. Beyond your charted space." She made a sweeping gesture upward. "I am what you might call princess?" "No, not right word." The translator struggled. "Successor. Heir to power." Kalen absorbed this revelation. "You're royalty, and you're running from your own people." "Why?" Her expression darkened. "My uncle killed my father. The throne was to be mine, but he arranged marriage to his son. I would be..." The translator cycled through options. "Figurehead. Puppet. Eventually dead. So you escaped." "Yes. Took small ship. Planned to reach neutral territory. Request asylum." She gestured to their surroundings with bitter amusement. "Not successful. And the hunters will not stop. Orders to bring me back. Alive if possible. Dead if necessary." Her amber eyes met his directly. "Why you help me?" "You have no obligation." Kalen hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I was a ranger once. Search and rescue on frontier worlds. Something happened. A massacre. My unit died. I survived. I couldn't save them." The words felt raw, exposed. "I came here to forget. To not be responsible for anyone else." The translator conveyed his meaning imperfectly, but Lyra seemed to understand the core of his confession. She reached out tentatively, her slender fingers brushing against his wrist in what he recognized as a gesture of solidarity. "We are both running from past," the translator conveyed. "Both alone." "Not anymore," Kalen replied, surprising himself with the words. "Not right now, anyway." Their moment of connection was shattered by a sound from the tunnel, the distinctive hum of advanced weaponry powering up. Their pursuers had tracked them despite their precautions. Kalen moved instantly, extinguishing their light and pulling Lyra deeper into the cave system. "There's another way out," he whispered. "If we can reach it." He never finished the sentence. A pulse of energy illuminated the tunnel behind them, missing Kalen's head by centimeters. He returned fire blindly, not hoping to hit anything but creating cover for their retreat. The cave system became a nightmare of shadow and pursuit. Kalen led them through increasingly narrow passages, some barely wide enough to squeeze through. Behind them, their hunters advanced with methodical precision, familiar enough with the technology to overcome the cave's interference. "They're hurting us," Kalen realized aloud as they emerged into a larger cavern with multiple exits. "They know the cave system." Lyra nodded grimly. "Standard tactic. They study terrain before hunt begins." This changed everything. If they couldn't outrun or outmaneuver their pursuers, they needed a new strategy entirely. "The storm," Kalen said suddenly. "It's directly above us now, at its peak intensity." He quickly explained his plan. Dangerous, possibly suicidal, but their only chance. Lyra listened intently, then nodded her agreement without hesitation. They altered course, heading not deeper but upward, toward a vertical shaft Kalen had discovered during previous explorations. The passage would lead them to a plateau directly exposed to the storm's fury, a place so dangerous that even Xylos' predators avoided it during tempests. The climb was brutal. Lyra's injuries slowed her considerably, but she refused Kalen's offers of assistance, pushing herself beyond what should have been possible. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. They emerged onto the plateau, just as lightning split the toxic sky above. The full force of the storm hit them immediately, winds powerful enough to stagger them, acidic rain hissing against their environmental suits, electromagnetic discharges dancing across the rocky surface. "There," Kalen pointed to a natural formation near the plateau's edge, a semicircular depression partially sheltered by an overhanging rock. "That's our position. You remember the plan?" Lyra nodded, her expression visible through her helmet visor. No fear, just resolute determination. They moved quickly to the formation, Kalen setting up the equipment he'd brought, components salvaged from his outpost, combined with elements from the energy trap that had held Lyra. She worked alongside him, her technical knowledge complementing his practical experience. The hunters emerged onto the plateau just as they completed their preparations. 3 figures in advanced environmental suits, weapons raised, moving with the coordinated precision of elite military units. Their helmets featured enhanced vision systems that cut through the storm's interference, instantly locking onto their quarry. "Final warning," came a voice through a universal translator, amplified to carry over the storm. "Surrender the fugitive." Kalen stepped forward, positioning himself between Lyra and the hunters. "She's under my protection," he called back, though the wind tore at his words. The lead hunter advanced a few steps. "This doesn't concern you, human. Step aside, and you may live." "Tempting offer," Kalen replied, his hand moving subtly to activate the device behind him. "But I'm going to have to decline." He dropped flat to the ground as Lyra triggered their makeshift electromagnetic pulse generator, a dangerous amalgamation of the trap's power source and components from Kalen's communications equipment, amplified by the storm's natural energy. The pulse erupted outward like a visible shock wave, momentarily turning the rain to steam where it passed. It struck the hunters directly, overwhelming their suits' protective systems. Their weapons discharged randomly, one bolt striking dangerously close to where Kalen lay. For a critical moment, the hunters were blind and vulnerable. Kalen didn't waste the opportunity. He fired 3 precise shots from his pulse rifle, aiming not to kill but to disable, destroying weapon systems and helmet visors. Beside him, Lyra had acquired one of his spare weapons and demonstrated surprising proficiency, her shots targeting knee joints and propulsion packs with surgical precision. The lead hunter recovered first, discarding his disabled weapon and drawing what appeared to be a ceremonial blade, a wicked curve of metal that glowed with the same energy as the trap had. He charged toward them with inhuman speed. Kalen met the assault, blocking the first strike with his rifle, which the blade sliced through like paper. He rolled backward, drawing his utility knife, laughably inadequate against the hunter's weapon, but his only option. What followed was a desperate dance on the edge of disaster. The hunter possessed superior strength, speed, and weaponry. Kalen had only his ranger training and intimate knowledge of moving in Xylos' treacherous environment. He used the plateau's uneven surface and the storm's unpredictable gusts to maintain distance, looking for an opening. In his peripheral vision, he saw Lyra engaged with the other 2 hunters, somehow holding her own despite her injuries. Her movements had a fluid grace that belied her weakened state, using the hunter's strength against them, luring them into overcommitting. The moment came when a particularly violent gust of wind caught the lead hunter mid-lunge. Kalen sidestepped, grabbed the hunter's extended arm, and used the momentum to propel him toward the plateau's edge. The hunter recovered with exceptional reflexes, but found himself standing directly on the spot Kalen had been carefully maneuvering him toward. "Now!" Kalen shouted. Lyra slammed her hand down on a second device they positioned. The rock beneath the lead hunter erupted with electrical energy, a modified version of the same trap that had held Lyra, using the storm's power and the plateau's natural mineral composition to create a containment field. The hunter froze, caught in the energy web, his body convulsing as the field tightened. His companions rushed to assist, only to be caught in the expanding field. Their advanced suits, designed to protect against conventional weapons, offered little defense against the modified trap using their own technology against them. For a moment, victory seemed within reach. Then the lead hunter, demonstrating astonishing will, began to fight through the paralyzing field. His hand, trembling with effort, reached for an emergency beacon on his belt. Kalen saw the danger too late. The hunter activated the beacon moments before Lyra fired a killing shot that pierced his helmet visor. The damage was done. The signal had gone out, a final report to whoever had sent them. The plateau fell suddenly quiet, the only sound the ongoing fury of the storm. Kalen and Lyra stood among the fallen hunters, both wounded from the confrontation. Kalen sporting a deep cut across his ribs where the energy blade had found its mark. Lyra with reopened wounds and a new injury to her leg. "We need to move," Kalen said, examining the beacon the hunter had activated. "This signal, it will bring others." Lyra nodded grimly, her breathing labored. "How long?" "Days, maybe weeks, depending how far they were when they received it. But they'll come." He looked at her steadily. "This isn't over." "It never is," she replied through the translator. "But we have time to prepare." They gathered what they could from the hunters: weapons, communication devices, any intelligence that might give them an advantage in the coming confrontation. Then, supporting each other through pain and exhaustion, they made their way back into the relative safety of the cave system. 3 months later, the outpost looked nothing like the ramshackle shelter Kalen had inhabited for years. Reinforced walls now protected against more than just Xylos' environment. Salvaged technology from the hunter's equipment had been repurposed into defense systems. Early warning sensors extended for kilometers in all directions. Inside, the single living space had been transformed. Sections had been partitioned to provide privacy. The chaotic collection of survival gear had been organized into functional stations. Plants, carefully cultivated non-toxic varieties, added touches of deliberate life to what had been merely a place to exist. Kalen stood at the observation port, watching another storm approach. The scars on his ribs had healed into pale lines, joining the collection of marks that told the story of his life. Behind him, Lyra entered from a newly constructed rear chamber, where she had been meditating, a daily practice he had come to respect. The northern sensors detected an atmospheric disturbance, he reported without turning. Could be natural, could be a ship making entry. Lyra moved to stand beside him, her presence no longer strange but essential. The past months had seen her complete recovery, revealing her true strength and capabilities. The translator lay unused on a nearby table. They had learned enough of each other's languages to communicate effectively without it. "If they come, we are ready," she said simply, her accent giving the human words an almost musical quality. Kalen nodded. They had discussed all possible options, fleeing further into uncharted space, seeking asylum in human territories, even attempting to contact allies from Lyra's world. In the end, they had chosen to make their stand here, on the hostile moon that had unexpectedly become home. "I've been thinking," he said, turning to face her, "about what happens after, if we survive this." Lyra's amber eyes met his, patient and knowing. Over the months, they had shared everything: their pasts, their nightmares, their hopes. The connection between them had grown from desperate alliance to something neither had words to fully express. "We will survive," she said with quiet certainty. And after, we will decide together. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining. 4 digits to 5, different yet perfectly complementary. In the gesture lay everything unsaid. Trust, companionship, the promise of a future neither had dared imagine before. Outside, the storm gathered strength, lightning illuminating the toxic forest. Inside, in the shelter they had built together, Kalen felt something he had forgotten existed. Peace. Whatever came next, they would face it together. No longer alone, no longer running. As if reading his thoughts, Lyra squeezed his hand. Home, she said softly in his language, the word carrying the weight of all they had endured and built. Home, Kalen agreed, looking not at the approaching storm, but at their joined hands and the promise they represented. On Xylos, where nothing good survived for long, they had found the exception, each other.